All right, hello again. So in this video, we're going to go over how to make navigation bars. How do you make the little navigation bars that you used to get around in websites? So we're going to do a couple of horizontal ones, vertical ones, ones that are responsive at the end. There's a lot of CSS in here, so most of it, a lot of it, I've left in here already. It's kind of off, half done. It's kind of like a baking show, right? So we're going to go in and add some missing parts. Right now, this is what it looks like. So we're going to do one that has a logo on the left and some nav links on the right. Then we're going to do a vertical navigation bar. This one is already, I think we're not doing anything with this one, or not much anyway, and not much with this one, but you'll see how these are different ways to do navigation bars. The most common way to do a navigation bar is using Flexbox. So that's what these last two are, and this one will be responsive, so it'll go from vertical to horizontal, depending on how wide the viewport is. And sorry, I sound a little nasally more than normal. Have a little malady still. So sorry about that. I might cough a little bit too, but don't worry about it. It's me, it's not you. So a little bit of background. So lists are used to create navigation bars because a navigation bar is a list of links, right? So it's good semantic markup to do that. You don't always see that, but you often will see a list used to do navigation bars, and screen readers will see it and say and navigate to it, and makes it easier to use for people that are vision impaired and using a screen reader, for example. You will see some that use that don't have lists, especially with things like using frameworks like React and things where there's less markup. It's still legal and works, and it's still accessible. The nav element is pretty important. So each of these has a nav tag. They're all inside of a nav tag. Some of them have lists inside. Well, all these have lists inside of them, but they don't necessarily have to have a list, but you usually will have a list inside of them. Okay, so let's go ahead and get going. So I'm going to go down, and there are comments in here on a lot of these lines, so it makes it a little messy. I'm going to admit that. Let me get rid of this sidebar here. So the file is list as navigation start, I think, is what I'm giving you guys. But there are comments in here for a lot of the lines of the CSS, because I wanted to put that in there so you guys could get a reference on what these lines are doing. And then so when they are missing, when the CSS is missing and it's only the comment tag, there's a comment tag, right? Make this a tiny bit bigger. That's where you kind of know that you need to add something. So lists already have bullets and margins and padding, right? So we're going to take that off for all these. So I'm going to go inside where it says nav ul, and let's say list style type none. There's none down there. So what that does is takes the bullets off the lists. So I don't know if you saw the bullet. Well, there was some right here, but now they're gone, right? We also want to get rid of the margin and padding, because there is built-in margin and padding. That's why this is over here and not over there. There's space right there, right? So we're going to go in here and say margin 0 and padding 0. And that takes off the default spacing. Sometimes you will see CSS resets that do that anyway, but we're doing it right here in this one up here at the top. Let me try to make this a little wider so you don't get this weird problems with these comments that I helpfully put in there for you guys. All right, so we want to also remove the underline from the links. You don't have to do that, right? It depends on what you want to do, but the default for a link is it's underlined, right? Which is fine. But maybe we don't want that. So to take that off, we're going to say text decoration none. That removes the underline from the links, as you can see there. All right. So now that part is done. So let's go down to number 1. So what number 1 is going to be, there's some of these styles are already in there, but we're going to have the My Site on the left. It's kind of like a logo. And then these 3 buttons are going to be on the right. So how do you put something on the left and then 3 more buttons, navigation buttons on the right? And a lot of this is kind of styling just text to make it look like a button. So we'll do that some, but some of it will already be done for you. So yeah. So let's go down to where it says nav1 ul. I think it's about line 91. we want it to go sideways, right? So by default, lists go vertical. That's why they're all, well, that one's not because it's not a list, but it's an inline. But all these are going vertical, right? So we want it to go horizontal right now. So how do we do that? Well, we can do that by saying display flex. So that's Flexbox, right? And if you haven't seen Flexbox yet, you will, but you probably have. But it's a common way to lay out elements in 2 dimensions, or 1 dimension actually, either horizontal or vertical, right? So when you say display flex to a list, instead of stacking up vertical because they're block elements, they stack up next to each other. So now it's going sideways. So that's it. So we want to also make this, make those aligned in the center. So I'm going to say align items center. And this will make sense when we start making some space. You can't really see some of this, what's happening yet, but you will. We also want to make some space between these. They're too close together. So with Flexbox and CSS Grid, you can use the gap property. So I'm going to say gap, and I'm going to go 4 pixels. So now there's 4 pixels of space between each of those. And I'm going to give them all a specific height. I'm going to say height of 52 pixels. Just happened to be what worked out. And so now the list itself has a height of 52 pixels. So now they are, it's a little bit higher right now. There's some breathing room for those things. So the last part, or one of the last parts, is we want to push all these over to the other side. So we're going to go down to line 102, and this looks like a complicated selector, which it kind of is, I guess. So we're in nav1. I should have showed you guys this earlier, but let me go down and go to the HTML. So each of these has like, it's inside of a div with a class of demo card. And then each of these has an ID on these. And then here's a div with nav2 wrapper. And then there's the nav. And then there's also an ID on this list here. So that's all in there already. So here's all the lists, right? There's the second or third one. Here's the fourth one, etc. Make sure you know that's going on. Okay, so back up to nav1. Where is it? Here we go. Nav1 ULLI first child. What does that mean? That means the first list item in the list called nav1, right? So that's why it looks like a complicated selector. So we're going to say margin right, because what we want to do is we want to push these guys over to the right. So we're going to say margin right, and we're going to say auto. And what that ends up doing is using all the available space between those and pushing those guys over. So there you go. So now we've got the logo on the left and these guys are on the right. I think that's good. So we want to style those buttons a little bit more. They don't really look like buttons yet. They're just like text. There is a rollover on there, but there's just text, and you can see there's some hover effects on there already. I didn't take everything out. But we're going to make these look a little bit more like buttons, right? So we're going to go down to line 118 where it says nav1 ULLIA. What does that mean? That means the link inside of the list item, inside of the list, inside of something that has an ID of nav1. So part of the reason these are longer is they're more selective, right? And they're going to have more specificity. So they're going to override some of the styles that are less specific. Like this one is less specific. That one, right? So the more there is to the selector, generally the more specific it is. So it will override some of the other styles, if that makes sense. Okay, so we're on line 118, and we're gonna say the first one. It says make the link fill the full list item area. So the way you do that is you say display block, and this is a common thing. I left this in here because this is how you make a link fill up the entire space that it has. So you say display block. Okay, and then on line, I gotta make this even bigger. It's got two lines. There we go. On line 119, we're going to say, we're going to make some space inside of these. And this is also typical for these links. So we're in the link, right? That's an A. We're going to use padding for that. This is kind of how you make a button sort of feel, is use padding to push the sides out. So we're going to say padding of 6 pixels and 14 pixels. What does that mean again? So you see I got bigger, right? Padding 6 pixels 14 means there's 6 pixels of padding on the top above the link. Let me see if I can show you that. Here's the link. There's 6 pixels there and there's 14 pixels there. So now it looks more like a button, right? If I right click on that and inspect, you can probably see it here as well. Yeah, so there's the padding, right? See, it says 6 pixels on the top and 14 on the side. So that's how you get it to look more like a button, is to use padding to push away from the link. That's just typically the way it's done. So I think that's good. The color is already on there. We want to make it rounded. Right now they're rectangular. You can leave them sharp, rectangular corners, but often you're going to see a border radius. So the way you round something is border radius. So I'm going to say border dash radius, and it's going to be 6 pixels. And so now you can see that they're rounded, right? That is good. So we also want to highlight, and this is for the user, we want to highlight the one that the user is, the page that the excuse me, the current page that the user's on. So a lot of times that's done with a class. So this is a very long selector. What does this mean? Let's go through this real quickly here. So this means an anchor or a link with a class of selected. This is called a dependent class. So that means a link that has, oh, it says it right there. A class equals selected. That's what we're selecting inside of a list item, inside of a UL, inside of something with an ID of nav1. So, and if I look down here, I'm sorry, I'm going to scroll down one more time. We're still on number 1, right? Trying not to make this take too long here. So I'm going to go down to number 1, and you see there's a class of selected on about. So that's our current, we're pretending that's our current page. So I already have a class equals selected on about. So we're going to make it the current page. That's why it's already white, because I already have that in there, I think. All right, so we're going to be on about line 132, I think is what it was. There's a lot of CSS in here, sorry about that. Okay, so it has the white text. We want to have it have a blue highlight or blue background. So we're going to say background dash color. And the color is 4361. So pound 4361 EE. So now there you see. So what this is telling the user, this is good to do as far as user interface design or user experience design, is to kind of tell them like, okay, this link looks different, right? That's telling the user, oh, I'm on the about page. And remember, you always want to have the link to the current page visible. You don't just take it out because like, oh, I'm already on that page. Why do I need a link to that? Because then the positioning of the links would change and the navigation bar would be changing all the time. So you usually have all the links there all the time. You just tell them that they're on that current page. Okay, I think that is it for that one. I may be missing something, a little bit of spacing here on this guy, but we're gonna go with that because I don't want to spend all day on this thing. All right, so let's go down to the second one. So this is a vertical navigation bar. So this is horizontal now, right? This one's gonna be vertical. It's already vertical, but we need to style it a little bit. It doesn't look quite right. So go down to about line 140. And we're going to give it a fixed width. So this one is for a fixed width. So I'm going to say width of 180 pixels. So now it has a fixed width of 180 pixels. We want a little bit of space between each menu item, but this is just a regular list at this point. So if you want to make a space between list items, you can use margin. So I'm going to say margin 3 pixels and 0. What does that mean? That means 3 pixels on the top and bottom and 0 on the left and right. So that's how you can do that. All right, so now we've got to go down and I think we've got to make a little bit of space inside of these links. So I kind of randomly left some stuff out, so sorry about that, but it's a little bit of hunt and peck here. So on line 153, should be 153, we want to make that space inside these buttons again, just like we did before. So we're gonna use padding to push out, right? I want to do that more than once so that you guys saw that again. So I'm gonna say padding, and this time it's gonna be 8 pixels and 12 pixels. All right, so now there is 8 pixels there on the top and bottom and 12 pixels on the left and right. Now there's extra space there, so there's more space on this side, but basically that makes those look like more like buttons. And I still have those, I already had those, I'm sorry, I already had those rollover colors there. So, but now you can see how that's kind of a nice little navigation bar, horizontal navigation, or a vertical navigation bar with a little subtle rollover that tells you that it's active. Remember, navigation, all these have little rollovers, I think. So that is user feedback, right? That is a micro interaction. That is telling the user that, hey, if I rolled over that and it changed, that probably means I can do something. What can you do? You can click on it and navigate to the catalog, right? So that is some user feedback for the user to tell them that they can actually do something, right? All right. I think that is it for that one. Yes. All right. The next one is an inline, and I'm not going to have you do anything on this one. This is really not used very often, so I'm just going to leave it like it is. But you can say, and let me show you what's going on here. So this one says display inline. What does display inline mean? Well, list items are block elements, right? They stack up vertically. If you say display inline, they're going to stack up horizontally, and they don't act like blocks anymore. So what they will do is kind of just line up next to each other like a sentence or a word. I think I have in here, like words in a sentence, right? So you can do it that way. Most of the time you don't, but it does work. What can happen though, what will happen is things can kind of get a little weird when they start wrapping, because it's just like a sentence, right? I also have in here white space no wrap right here. If I take that out for a second, you don't have to do this. I'm going to take that out and show you what happens. So you see what happened right there? So this is the same link, but it's on 2 separate lines, because inline elements will go left to right until there's no space, and then they'll wrap to the next line. So that link is in 2 places. That's weird, right? So that's why I have white space no wrap. So that means that the link, the A, right, the anchor, can't wrap or can't break to the next line. So they're all in one piece at least. That's it. Yeah, not done a whole lot, so we're not going to spend a ton of time on that one. The next one is display inline block, which might come up occasionally. Most of the time you're going to use Flexbox, but display inline block does work. And what inline block lets you do, which inline doesn't, padding and width values don't really work on inline elements. So you can't get the spacing to be kind of regular and things. Yeah, you can't really size things very reliably, but you can using inline block. So inline block means, just like it sounds, there are block elements, but they go horizontally. So that means you can give them a height and a width and things like that. There is a little quirk in them. Browsers will add a gap between inline block elements if you have white space in your HTML. It's just a weird little, it's almost like a bug. But you see these are vertical right now, and also change the shape of these buttons. So all these shapes are just from different border radiuses, different colors, different borders, things like that. So those styles are already in there. We're on nav 4, right? So we want them to go side by side and respect the width and the padding, not like display inline, right? So all we have to do on this one, we're on line 219 actually, is we want to say display inline block. Inline dash block. So what that does is now they stack next to each other. Now they're going underneath each other, and that's because they are block elements. If there's not space, which is kind of a good effect a little bit, if there's not space for all of them, they will go to the next line because they're inline elements. They stack up left to right, but they're also blocked so they can go down to the next line. So if I'm here, if I'm wide, it looks like, they space out kind of nicely there, right? And then if I get more narrow, then they start to wrap to the next line, and eventually they become vertical. So it's kind of responsive a little bit. But you can see, unlike these guys, they're all the same width. They all have the same spacing. So that's one of the advantage of the inline block is we could give it a width of 130, which I already did. And then we also use some specific spacing. We said 4 pixels on the top and 3 pixels on the sides. That's the spacing between those guys. So that is a possibility, but also not used a ton anymore because of Flexbox. So now we're gonna get to the ones that you probably will use more. We used Flexbox on the first one actually, but these two did not. This one you don't need it because it's just vertical. You don't really need Flexbox. You could use Flexbox on this one, but you don't really need to for vertical only, if it's only vertical. But the last two we're going to use Flexbox. So we're going to go down to number 5. We're on number 5. We're going to say display flex. So then you can fix the spacing and alignment problems of inline and inline block. And then flex 1, if you put flex 1, which is short for flex 110, I believe, which is the flex grow, flex shrink, and flex basis. I'm not going to get into that right on this one. You'll see that in the Flexbox video. But basically it makes them distribute and size. They'll get their maximum size, and they'll be evenly spaced. And then flex wrap will let them wrap to the second row on small screens, which it's doing already actually. But all right, so we're on nav 5. I think we're on line 261. I think this is all in there. Yeah. Okay. So 261. So we want them to lay out in a row. So the way we do that is the same way we did it on the first one. We say display flex. So now they're going sideways. Uh-oh. But look what's going on. They're going sideways, but they're leaking out of the container because it's not wrapping. So we want to make sure that it will wrap. So we say, if necessary, right? We say flex wrap. Oops, I just typed it wrong. Flex, wrap, and wrap. So now they are wrapping. So if there's not space, they will wrap to the next line. So that is better. We also want to work with the spacing. Right now there's no spacing there. So we're going to say a gap of 6 pixels. So now we have a gap of, 6 pixels, and there we go. So I think that's working pretty well. We might want to center that. All right, sorry, I had to cough there a little bit. We might want to center, but what we're going to do instead is make these take up more of the available space. So we do that on the next line, on line 2, under nav 5 li on line 267. So we're going to say flex 1 on that one, which is shorthand for flex 110. So that means they can grow. They'll grow to take up all the available space. So now, since they grow to take up all the available space, it automatically fills up this whole navigation bar. I do have minimum width of 100, so they won't get below 100 pixels, and that makes them wrap instead. And then, so if I do this, and we should add the text align center too, even though, yeah, we want the text to be in the center. So let's add text align center, which you probably know about. and that will center the text in the different buttons. So now if I resize, and it does do this weird thing because it's taking up all the available space because of the Flex 1, right? Now there's only 4 buttons fit on this line, and the program's button goes to the next line, and it gets bigger to fill the available space, which is a little awkward. I mean, it's not horrible, but a little bit awkward. But it works. So that's using Flexbox on that one, and I think that's it for that guy. So the last one is we're going to make a responsive nav bar that stacks like this. It's kind of already stacked by default on mobile, and then on desktop it's going to go sideways. So that means we have to use a, and we don't have to, but we're going to use a media query on this one. So let's go ahead and go down. I think we have to go down to line... Well, let me go back and just make sure you guys know what's going on here. So right now it's just like a normal vertical nav bar, kind of like this one, right? It just has a wrapper that holds the whole thing, and then each one of the links is display block. It has some padding to spread it out a little bit. It's got a color, got a font size, which it doesn't really have to have, but it does. It's got a border on the bottom, which actually is that showing up? I'm not sure it's showing up, but a border on the bottom, and then it has a little transition. That's the little animation on the color. Then it's got a hover color, which gives it a little bit of an interaction, right? It's also got a selected one. That's the same thing we did last time. We added the selected class to this button, and that's down in the HTML. You just say class equals selected. So down here on line 334, I have add media query here, right? So media query, if you haven't seen it, which you may have seen it at this point or may not, depending on when you see this video, is you can change the styles depending on some conditions. So let me show you what this looks like without all this here. Don't do this, but I'm going to delete all that. And now you can see what this looks like by default. It's just a list that's stacked up. So there's some styles in here. I'm going to undo that. There's some styles in here that we only want to work when we're at a certain width or above a certain width. So the way we do that is we say at media and then screen. I'll just type this and then I'll explain it. And min width. This gets away sometimes. Min width 600 pixels, and then there goes a bracket there. So it's kind of like nested CSS, right? And forgive me if you've already seen this, but maybe you haven't, so I'm explaining it here. So I've got to take this, so this is called a curly brace. I'm going to take this guy and drag it way down to where it says finish media query here, right there. So now there is a media query in there. What does that mean? This media query means if, it's sort of like a test, right? A filter. If we're looking at this on a screen, yes we are, this is a screen, right? And the minimum width is 600, then, so you can think of this curly brace as a then, do all this stuff. And that's the end of it. So there's more styles. These are just normal CSS rules, but they do not work unless we're on a screen and we have a minimum width of 600 pixels. So above 600 pixels, right? So it's already doing something, it's centering anyway, but it's not quite done. We have to add some more to this. All right. So we want this to be, so that's what the media query is. It starts there and it ends there. So if we go to line 336, we're going to say display flex because we want it to go sideways when we're above 300 or 600 pixels. So I'm going to say display flex like we've done a bunch of times. And now, oh, look at that. It's already doing it. So when we're below 600 pixels, it's vertical. When we're above 600 pixels, it's horizontal. So it's kind of responsive. Well, it is responsive. That is responsive, right? Just like we do with our responsive layouts where we have let columns, and then when we get too narrow, we don't have space for columns anymore. We're going to go to rows, right? Same thing here. So that's how that works. So we just did display flex there. I do want to change one thing though. I don't know if you guys saw this, but when I resize, right, so it's working fine. It gets wider, right? The buttons all get wider, they fit. Doesn't matter how wide I get or get to my max width there. And then I get narrower, and then where I get about right there, see, there's not enough space for all the buttons anymore. So it starts to go off the outside and you can't see it anymore. You don't really want that. That probably won't come up very often because you'd have to be this exact width. And then it switches to vertical and it's fine. But we want to switch to vertical a little earlier for this, in this example. Let's say you wanted to change that. So the way I do that is so I'm inspecting here, right? If I went to inspect, and whenever you are inspecting, when you resize your browser window, up here in the top right, well, now you can't see it unless I'm doing it. You see the numbers changing? That's the width of my browser window. So when does that start to become a problem? Right about there. I'm about 720. So I'm going to change this media query. Instead of 600, I'm going to start to go 720. That's when I want it to go vertical. So it won't be going sideways unless we're above 720. So now when I get below, right till I get to 720, it goes vertical and it's fine, right? It's kind of wide, but there may be too many of these in here to work well this way, but you get the idea. So there it's switching. And then one more thing I wanted to do is maybe on the vertical. So I'm gonna inspect again, right? And I'm gonna go to the mobile view and see how these look. So that one's kind of broken because it's not going vertical. So that's what we just did on the last one. But you see how it's not quite fitting there. This one's okay. That one is gonna do what it's gonna do. It's just inline. These are okay. I mean, it works. It's just got some extra space there. This one kind of works, even though the buttons get different sizes. And this one looks okay. But a lot of times, you might want to center these, but you might not, depending on the buttons, right? Or depending on your preference. I mean, I think sometimes you see them centered and sometimes you don't. So if you wanted to center them, you would go up to you would put this text-align center up again on nav6li, but up here before the media query. Do we have a nav6li? We don't. Let's do this. This is just the kind of stuff you got to do. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to go above the media query to right here. Makes sense. And I will say text-align center again. So now it's centered. So actually I don't need the bottom one now because it's still going to be centered, I think. So I could take that one off. And it's still going to be centered because that's the default. Because I set it up there, right? So I'm not changing it here. So I can leave it in or take it out, whatever. But now it's centered there. And when it's in the mobile view, and if I get out of the mobile view and go wide enough, it's centered there as well. So what I did was go up to about line 308 and I added this. So I added nav6li text-align center, and that's why this is now centered. Unless you don't want it, then you can leave it left. So if I turn this off, now it's on the left. Although that looks a little weird to me, so I'm going to make it centered. All right, so I think that is it for the nav bars. So the one thing this didn't have is drop down. These navigation bars don't have drop downs, or it's not It's not like a hamburger menu where you click on it and it opens. That is almost always involves some JavaScript. So you probably will see an example, or you can look up an example of that, where you can click on a little hamburger menu, the three little lines, and then the navigation will open, and then you click on it again and it closes. And then when you get to a desktop, let me show you actually. So here it is. This is an example on W3 Schools. So you've got a horizontal nav bar, and then when I get smaller, it turns into what people call a hamburger menu. And then you click on it, it opens, you click on it again, it closes. So it's responsive in that it changes because there's not enough room on mobile to have all those links. So you have this, right? But here's the code for this, and you're welcome to use this kind of stuff if you need to. Here's the code, and there should be some JavaScript. Yeah, there's a tiny bit of JavaScript in there. So you have to kind of, you don't have to, but almost always you will see some JavaScript used to open and close that navigation, that vertical navigation. Okay, so that's not in here, but you know where you can find it. All right, I think that's it for this one. Sorry if that was dragging on a little bit, but I hope that helped a little bit with navigation bars, and I will talk to you again later.